Thank you very much, Mr. President. Given the conditions that were just laid out at the migrant facilities at the U.S. border, will you commit to allowing journalists to have access to the facilities that are overcrowded moving forward?
I will commit when my plan very shortly is underway to let you have access to not just them, but to other facilities as well.
How soon will journalists be able to have access to the facilities? We've obviously been allowed to be inside one, but we haven't seen the facilities in which children are packed together to really give the American people a chance to see that. Will you commit to transparency on this issue?
I will commit to transparency. And as soon as I am in a position to be able to implement what we're doing right now, and one of the reasons I haven't gone down,
And Biden pivots immediately to, look, I will admit to transparency absolutely, entirely, 100%. I am not like the previous administration. Joe Biden, will deal with the issues of transparency when I complete what I need to complete. When I finish cleaning up my mess, I will let you look upon my work. But until then, stay the fuck away. That's basically what this answer is. That's a pretty straightforward answer. She asked twice, and he answered twice. No. That position, however, didn't last all that long. When on Tuesday, I was about to do the show, like at 2 in the morning, showing this, Joe Biden allows the Associated Press into one of the facilities. And I caution, warning. I mean, basically the press was looking extremely hard to try to basically feed on the misery of the various kids that are crossing the border. And look, Joe Biden took a policy position. And whether you want to say the policy position is right or wrong, there's certain consequences from that position. One of those is that people are going to realize, especially the more you talk about it, that the border is open for children. And when those kids come, Biden has basically said, I'm not going to send them back. And so more kids have an impetus to come since they believe that those kids will have a chance of being able to stay. Now, the larger truth goes beyond this, because that's trying to deal with the situation when you're already at the end of the decision space. That doesn't get to, how about we just not blow those countries to shit in the first place? And the fact that the media and Joe Biden can't talk about it honestly means that this issue is just persistent. And it's persistent as a result of our actions in South America. We're driving our monsters in this very specific case, or we're creating our monsters. This is a karmic consequence of what we're doing. It's almost like the bastard child. Like the children show up at the door, are you my daddy? And it's not the daddy thing per se, but am I responsible for you being here now? That answer, just like if it was sperm dropped off in a vagina 9 months prior, the answer would be yes. We're causing this. And the fact that Biden can't talk about it honestly, the media can't talk about it honestly, means they have no plans at all of stopping. I want to talk about the migrant crisis and the issue at the border. Joe Biden has just relented and has released a horror show. And again, I want to make the very basic point that the media and Biden, neither are talking about this honestly. And because they're not talking about it honestly, there's no chance at all, no impetus, nothing that can change this situation anytime soon. And I would go further to say it will get worse. Biden is going to have to ramp up some level of faculty in order to maintain all of these kids. Because right now, they're packed in like sardines. 1,000% over capacity. And they're not checking for COVID in people who don't look like they have COVID. But they already know that up to 5% of the kids have COVID, which means that disease can be getting passed throughout this facility, and they don't know it. Welcome to the soapbox. I hope you saw that. 4,000 crammed into a space of 250. 4,000 crammed into a space of 250. And again, COVID. Let's keep going. At the press conference the other day, when Joe Biden was asked about this, he gives a very weird answer in regards to policy that does not make sense, and I'm not even sure if he thought about it. And it sounds like he's just operating on this notion of, well, I don't want to send the kids back because I feel weird sending the kids back. And yeah, I understand that you feel weird sending the kids back, but just be aware that that policy will incentivize a flush number of kids to show up. When pushed on this, he tried to say that it wasn't the policy of allowing the kids to come into the country that basically incentivized kids from coming into coming to the country. That it wasn't because he was such a great guy and everything else. But the problem is the numbers are going up. Meaning, for example, the reporters allow inside describe extreme levels of overcrowding. This is the Washington Post. Including one detention pod with 516 minors, despite the pandemic rated capacity of 32. Another pod had 676 minors, and a third, 567, officials said. The Biden administration is on pace to take in more than 17,000 accompanied minors this month, far higher than the previous record of 11,861 in May of 2019. So basically, the argument that Joe Biden is making that this is normal, this is seasonal, this is, the numbers are going up. And I suspect the numbers are going up because this report is going around the world. This issue is being talked about around the world, including in those various countries. Joe Biden going out and saying, don't come to America. We're not ready yet. We're not ready yet. Whatever that means. We're not ready yet. Well, what message does that send if you think about it? The message that it sends is, don't come to America, but if your kids come, we'll keep them. Which message you think rings truer? Because at the end of the day, if you're going to keep their kids, you're going to keep their kids. The wild part, though, is an answer that Joe Biden gave here. Because, like I said, they can't talk about it honestly. And the fact they can't talk about it honestly gets across that nothing is going to change in the context of this policy. Let's
go back to immigration, please. You just listed the reasons that people are coming, talking about in-country problems, saying that it happens every year. You blamed the last administration. Sir, I just got back last night from a reporting trip to the border where I met 9-year-old Josel, who walked here from Honduras by himself, along with another little boy. He had that phone number on him, and we were able to call his family. His mother says that she sent her son to this country because she believes that you are not deporting unaccompanied minors like her son. That's why she sent him alone from Honduras. So, sir, you blame the last administration, but is your messaging in saying that these children are and will be allowed to stay in this country and work their way through this process, encouraging families like Josel's to come?
Well, look, the idea that I'm going to say which I would never do, if an unaccompanied child ends up at the border, we're just going to let them starve to death and stay on the other side. No previous administration did that either, except Trump. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. That's why I've asked the Vice President of the United States yesterday to be the lead person on dealing with focusing on the fundamental reasons why people leave Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador in the first place. It's because of earthquakes, floods. It's because of lack of food. It's because of gang violence. It's because of a whole range of things that when I was vice president,
a whole range of things that in no way at all have anything to do with me, us as a country. It is all them and acts of God, but mostly all them. Those brown people can't keep their affairs in order. So fortunately, we have money that we're going to give to the various people in the places to try to, tamp down on them coming and showing up here. It's a very weird answer. And I often wonder, where is the press on this? This is kind of like the Psaki question earlier today on Iran, where she says basically, yeah, we're going to mutually get back to the deal. And nobody in the room has the compunction, the honesty, maybe even the width of perspective to raise their hand and say, well, wait a minute. The United States pulled out the deal. And if the U.S. pulled out the deal, up the pressure campaign, and Iran stuck with it for another year, how is it Iran's fault? Why are they the ones going back to the deal first? Shouldn't the United States go back to the deal first? Not to mention, was it a mistake to pull out the deal in the first place? And if it was, what about the people that were killed and murdered in pursuit of that deal and the policies that Trump put in or the United States followed as a pursuit of that deal? More importantly, why should they go back first? Why is that fair? They don't think that way. An American perspective says that question doesn't apply. It is our right. It is our right as rulers of this world to have the discretion to be able to do stuff just like that. And our vassal states will never call us on it because they are vassal states. And I'm talking about Europe here. This question belies the fact of us. It ignores us. Once again, it drops the context of us. And it's well tried and well understood context. And yet, nobody here would bring it up. Those countries are not a basket case because they are acts of God. Those countries are a basket case for all sorts of reasons. Yes, maybe floods. But when you get into the gangs or the basket case governments and all of that, you can't leave that entirely at the doorstep of those countries. Evo Morales was taken out in a coup. That coup was backed by the U.S. using PATSI, American Organization of American States. That institution, that body has just been basically a tool of U.S. foreign policy interests when it needs to undermine elections or attack various countries. Evo Morales won that country or that election by like 10 points, something that is unheard of in U.S. elections. And yet they were able to get him out of office, attacking him, vilifying him with several massacres to boot on that very specific issue of him and getting him out of power. He was successful, wildly so, as a president. His party has just now got back in power. Mainstream media is looking at it as if it's an authoritarian takeover because they're putting people who were responsible for massacres in prison. The reality of it is the Western press lied in order to back U.S. interests. And with the context of that, and you look at the other countries like Venezuela, it makes you wonder whether or not they are radically lying about that one too. I think they are. I mean, especially since when you look at it in real terms, what they did in Bolivia, he blew it out the water. And they still looked at that and said, he didn't win that, or it wasn't a coup. That's the other part. They couldn't necessarily own up to the fact that it was a coup, despite the military's saying they're putting out an arrest warrant for the president just because he was the president and he won the race by 10 points and embarrassed the opposition. Evo Morales, Western back, or at the very least U.S. back. Lula da Silva and Dilma Rousseff, both, da Silva was put into a cage. He was put into a cage because he was going to beat Bolsonaro, and the Workers' Party that he belongs to has done phenomenal things for Brazil. They were going to keep doing those phenomenal things with their interest in dealing with the poor and the disadvantaged. And the military, the United States, various elements of that society did not like it. He was going to win in spades. And they intervened into that election to put him into a cage with the military, threatening even to go as far as a coup and take it, a military takeover of the country itself. If it wasn't for Glenn Greenwald, he would still be in that cage right now, as opposed to being out of that cage and potentially running in the race in order to beat Bolsonaro. I'm just making the point that the lengths that they were willing to go. And yes, they were bragging about the United States working with them in order to do this coup. Honduras, Zelaya, Hillary Clinton doesn't brag. I'm not going to say she brags about it, but she definitely talks about dude being taken out in his pajamas and doesn't want to call it a coup because in her head, he's like Hugo Chavez. He's one of those troublesome, dirty lefties, and she didn't like him. So they went along with the transition government and allowed that country to basically devolve into fire. The Honduran that he's talking about, she should have followed that up with, sir, what about the coup that took place in Honduras in your administrations with Obama and Hillary Clinton in the State Department? Do you share any blame or responsibility for this kid being here right now? That's a question. That's a question that should have been asked of Joe Biden. They were in office during the time when that country was set on fire. How do you not ask him that question? Especially with the notion that they did not let the president come back in, which was basically the policy of the United States overtly. In reality, they didn't like the guy, so they got rid of him. Venezuela, they're walking around pretending that a man who didn't win a pie shop, an election in a pie eating contest, is supposedly president of Venezuela, going so far as to try to inspire various coups and help him instigate various coups where he will go through violently, killing, maiming whoever he needs to get his hands on Maduro. This was one of the special forces agreements that he came up with, that the only way he was ever going to make that work is with the signage and the permission and the allowance of the U.S. And he had that permission and allowance. They tried to kill Maduro multiple times. They tried to kill Hugo Chavez multiple times. The support of the public is the only thing that kept them alive. Juan Guaido, if they get his hands on him, is going to be prosecuted at this point. And he should be. He's a traitor. Nicaragua, El Salvador, those are the other countries Joe Biden named. The death squads that were roaming through El Salvador because the United States didn't like the Sandinista government. And even the coup that was attempted or that was being planned against Nicaragua a little bit earlier on. I guess I'm making the point that if you are going to talk about South America and you're going to not or leave out the point of Guatemala, Chile, the dictators that were put into those countries, the crops or the unit crops where you would have bananas being the major thing because United Fruit basically buys up everything, have private enterprise basically owning all of it. The electricity companies, the power, the rail, etc., not to mention the politicians, not to mention the grounds. And so you get politicians who try to push a little bit to the left, they try to get something for their workers, and private enterprise, who owns it all, screams, communism. And they go to the president and say, hey, we need help. And the CIA comes in and murders, kills, runs operation campaigns, and not just runs operation campaigns, killed generals that weren't backing their agenda or that couldn't be bought off, and trying to basically influence directly the elections of those countries. The killings, in some cases, backfired, but that still didn't necessarily stop them from a putsch attempt years later, where in one case they even bombed the Capitol building on behalf of the right-wing government that was trying to take power. He's not going to say that. The media doesn't say that. And how can you get to the nub, the root of why the countries are basket cases and why people are showing up with name tags on, asking if you are their daddy? And the only answer to that, despite the fact that you may deny all of these babies, the media may not want to bring up all of these babies, but at the end of the day, it looks just like you because you were directly responsible for them being here. Joe Biden wants to throw a little bit of dollars back to the country after basically being involved in various coups in those countries, as opposed to just stopping the coups. And you can't even say that you learned from your mistakes because, again, Honduras was only a few years ago. Zelaya in Honduras was only a few years ago. And the guy that's in there now was implicated in a cocaine case where he was caught talking about he's going to put cocaine into the nose of every gringo. The press said, hey, is that guy a partner? Is that guy a partner? Now, Zelaya, before, up to that point, this guy, 80% of the cocaine that runs through South America runs through Honduras right now, as a result of that coup that set that place on fire, where gangs are basically roving the streets that would incentivize that mom to send her kid this distance to get away from that life, which gets across how bad that life is. But that life didn't get like that on magic. There were actions, choices that were made in this country to get rid of people we didn't particularly like. And we didn't care about what was going to take place in the context of the country. And since we didn't care what was going to take place within the context of the country, we can't necessarily be shocked by the blowback of take me home, motherfucker. Yeah, it aggravates me that we can't talk about this. Because like I said, the fact that we can't talk about it means it's going to be replicated. They have no compunction, no issue. They don't even see how toppling governments is wrong. In their mind, it's our discretion to do so. What they're not going to like, however, is that that behavior has created an opposition united around you. Or I should say us, because I live here. China, Russia, Iran. Those three in and of itself are going to create a power block that is going to be phenomenal in the coming decade. All of them have certain attributes that when brought together accentuate each other's strengths. On top of that, you're going to get other countries that are going to join into that, let's say, world point of view. And some of those are going to be in South America, Venezuela, Honduras, Bolivia, and keep in mind, and maybe even Brazil. And the reason is because we have had direct engagement in attacking these countries. And these countries, when you have a coup that puts Lula in prison, I don't think he's necessarily going to be on board for helping you out. When you have a coup that takes Elias out, turns our country to a basket case, I don't think you're going to be able to get somebody, especially if there's a change in the election. And Ecuador was basically a coup by other means, meaning he was so submissive, Moreno, and it was a radical departure from Correa. Not to mention he sold Julian Assange for a pound of silver. I guess I'm making the point that all of these governments, for the most part, knuckled under, as opposed to when there was a full-bodied understanding of sovereignty. And based on overreaction or let's say overaction and this kind of imperialistic, purview or imperialistic discretion, those countries, when they come back together and those leftist governments come back in, they will be working together and they will be far harder to pull something like this again. On top of that, they will probably also be working with that new alignment from the standpoint of China, Russia, and Iran, and the countries that work around with those countries, because the Belt and Road Initiative is going to allow China to ingratiate itself with a huge number of countries. And the choice is going to be made on who they work with. China has given away 40% of its vaccines. The U.S. has given away 0. That's despite the fact that the United States has been pushing states not to use the Russian Sputnik V vaccine or not to use the Chinese vaccine, because those vaccines give a certain degree of foreign policy credibility, and they don't want Russia and China getting wins. So if it's between Russia and China getting a perceptual win versus you and your population dropping dead and asphyxiating in the street from COVID, the latter, from our perspective, is preferable. And weirdly enough, many of the states in Europe and even in Brazil had the same thought. Like, share, and subscribe. And by the way, definitely make sure you're subscribed. They've been doing some really screwy stuff. Thanks all. See you guys later.